that debt to build some houses.
Question number 5, Dr Duncan Webb.
To the Minister of Finance. Thank you, Mr Speaker. What recent reports has he received on the government's financial statements?
The Honourable Grant Robertson.
Mr Speaker, today Treasury released the financial statements for the government for the 6 months to 31 December. They showed core Crown tax revenue was $597 million higher than forecast at $40.4 billion. Expenses were $166 million above forecast at $39.6 billion, and that the operating balance before gains and losses was $779 million above forecast at $1.1 billion. Meanwhile, core Crown net debt was 23.2% of GDP at the end of December, slightly lower than the 23.4% forecast in the half-yearly update.
Outstanding.
Supplementary. What were the drivers for revenue coming in higher than expected?
Analysis indicates that greater than expected employment growth at the end of the year contributed to source deductions coming in at $245 million higher than they expected in their PAY forecast released in December. That's right, Mr Parker. Treasury noted that they expect some of this variance to be permanent, and they will incorporate this positive variance into their Budget 2018 fiscal forecasts.
How do the December statements fit with wider economic indicators?
Well, Mr Speaker, the trends seen in the financial statements fit with other recent indicators of economic activity. Unemployment fell to its lowest level in 9 years in December, and the ANZ job ad series for January rose by the most in 3 years. Meanwhile, the ANZ Consumer Confidence Index rose in January at the highest rate in 3 years, and employee confidence measured by the Westpac McDermott Miller Index is at its highest level in nearly a decade. Mr Speaker, business confidence in their own activity, which is most closely related with economic growth, remains positive. It's early days, Mr Speaker, but the sun is shining and Mr Joyce should cheer up.
Supplementary, Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Does this mean that the Finance Minister now accepts that he possibly accepts a good economic, inherited a good economic record?
Let's start addressing...
I'd just like to address the whole. Does the Finance Minister now accept, Mr Speaker, that he's inherited a very good economic performance in New Zealand from the previous government, and the only statistics he forgot to mention in his recent spiel was about business confidence, which is down, and does he accept he will have to do something about that to maintain that good economic track record?
Order. I am going to let the Minister answer the question, but I am going to counsel the finance spokesman for the National Party to restrict the length of his questions succinct. One supplementary, succinct, not 3 or 4 and long.
Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, the member is clearly distracted today because I did mention business confidence levels in my answer that I just gave just now. The issue that the member needs to concern himself with is confidence levels in the national backbench.
Question number 6, the Honourable Jerry Browning.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.